Ladies and gentlemen, welcome all to SMIW.
I loved every bit of it, and that was probably the greatest time of my life.
I tore my AC, the joint that connects your shoulder to your collarbone.
There was difficult tension between me and Dwayne for personal reasons.
Nick and I didn't speak for over a year. SMIW wasn't just a hobby. It was a passion, and it was a dream. I've been able to experience and live that dream in my own way. When talking about SMIW, we really have to go back to the very beginning. And SMIW started how I believe a lot of things start, and that's just being the fan of something. I was a fan of professional wrestling at a very young age. I remember, being in the backyard with my brother and my dad and just, wrestling around together when we were very young and, trying to pin each other and, that sort of thing. And
we had the trampoline out back there for a little while doing that, and I remember we used to wrestle around with Dad all the time, even in the apartments. I do remember that slightly.
I'd been wrestling with my uncle, my brother, and stuff at home all the time. We even had them stupid little WWE stuffed doll things as Stone Cold and Hulk Hogan and crap. We would jump off the dressers in our trailer and just elbow drop. Man, and at the time I had a big thing for Randy Savage. So, I was always doing that pumping elbow drop off the top of a dresser. That was cool. But
Daniel and I also had the action figures and, a bunch of the different toys, the t-shirts, a lot of that stuff. So we were fans at a very young age.
I remember we had multiple wrestling rings, for our action figures and stuff like that. And, our entire bedroom floor would just be filled with that stuff. We had the foam and plastic replica belts.
Daniel and I, we would catch wrestling on TV as often as we could. We grew up during that Attitude Era. We had, the Stone Cold Steve Austins, the Rocks, the Undertakers, a lot of the real big names, the Shawn Michaels, all those guys. And growing up watching that, a lot of kids, grow up with superheroes, the DC and Marvel comic book characters and things of that nature. I didn't really get into that. That wasn't really something I got into. The wrestlers that I saw every Monday night on Raw is War, those guys were my superheroes. And it made an impact on me very, very early on in my life, seeing what these guys were doing, physically, the storylines. I'm a very big sucker for a good story, so the storyline is good, the characters draw you in. There was so much about it that I loved, and I gravitated towards that.
It's just something that's been a lifelong interest, and it's, as we got older, I'm not so much interested in the mainstream wrestling product as much as we used to be, but overall it's still been of lifelong interest.
I think looking back on that today, there was a part of me that always wanted to be a professional wrestler, even though at the time I may not have known it. Once I had gotten older, I got into school, had a few friends that were also into wrestling, and one of them was a guy by the name of Tony Ham. And luckily, he lived not too far away from us, and we were able to get together with him. He had a trampoline, also enjoyed wrestling, and so we would start just, doing some wrestling moves on a trampoline like a lot of kids do, just mimicking what we saw on TV.
At the time, our friend Tony, he had that trampoline and stuff, and I spent a lot of time hanging out with him, and a lot of time hanging out with Dee, and we would go and we'd wrestle on these trampolines, and we even recorded that then, and that was awful. That was horrible. And these matches, one match would be like 3 hours of just jumping around on this trampoline and doing our moves and stuff.
And at the time, doing SMIW as a full-fledged promotion and production wasn't on the mind. We weren't thinking about that. We were just, a couple, real young kids throwing each other around on a trampoline and having some fun with it. I want to say it wasn't until about early 2004. I don't recall exactly which mall we went to, but it was myself, my brother, and my parents. We went to some mall somewhere, and they had a video store. I think it might have been an FYE or something like that, I think it was called. And on one of the end caps, they had VHS tapes, the best of backyard wrestling. And on these tapes, they would have just teenage guys and gals, doing, some of it was some pretty stupid stuff.
A lot of the stuff in those were awful. And, even though we had never done anything like that, when we were that age, when we were, teenagers and stuff like that, when we first got the idea, it was like, that's not setting the bar very high, with what was on those tapes. And I'm sure we probably thought we can do way better than that.
But they had their own characters. They had their own promotion. They had their own championship belts, and they were doing, a lot of them, essentially what we were doing, just, I guess, a little more structured and being a little more creative with it.
We watched, wrestling a lot when we were kids, and that was just kind of like, it was a much more, it wasn't all the glitz and the glamour of the, the big money production. So it was like, yeah, we could probably do something like that.
So after seeing those tapes, I had this idea of, well, why don't the three of us, being myself, my brother, and Tony at the time, why don't we do a little something like this? So after watching these tapes, presenting this idea, we decided to come up with a company name, a championship belt, some characters, and, really start to turn this into something that we could really have some fun with. So once we start wrestling over at Tony's, we decided to do this thing and, do a little promotion. So we started throwing some ideas around, and we settled on Suicidal Backyard Wrestling Federation. And looking back on it now, it does sound kind of silly, but to a couple very young teenagers, it sounded cool to us at the time. So that's what we went with.
I personally hated it. It just didn't roll off the tongue. SBWF just did not roll off the tongue very well to me. I don't know why. It just always kind of made me cringe a little bit. So I was glad we kind of moved away from that after a while.
And now that we had a name, it was time to develop some characters. So we all came up with a character, and so Daniel was known as Fear. Tony would become Havoc, and I would be known as Pain. And those would be the characters that we'd bring in and, portray for this new wrestling promotion.
I know I took the name from Metal Gear Solid 3. I was a huge fan of that game. I think right at the time that game was fairly new when we started doing this stuff. And I remember in that game there was a boss fight where you fight a guy named The Fear. So I just kind of stole that and used that. But in terms of the actual character itself, there was really no direction for it. It was kind of just it was just me with a different name is really all it was at the time. I don't know. At that time, I don't think we really, with the exception of Dwayne and the Pain character, I don't think really too many of us at that time really had like a character we were trying to develop. It was just, hi, that was pretty much how that went.
And now that we have all that, it was time to develop the championship belt. The reason that we're wrestling to begin with. And we didn't have any money at all. So even the characters that we portrayed, were just stuff that we kind of threw together. That's all we had. The trampoline was all we had. The championship belt was going to be no different. So the championship belt, I took some of the kids' championship belts you could buy at a Walmart or a Myers or something, that were like foam and plastic, and basically made up my own design or plates, out of just some paper, and colored it all in and came up with my own design, and like kind of glued these designs over top of this kids championship belt. And again, it's looking back on it now, it was really kind of corny, but that's what we had.
And the belts, those things were awesomely terrible back then. The replica WWE belts, and I mean, it's actually kind of sad. I actually took paper and drew the design and with colored pencils and all that shit. Oh man, that was wonderful. It was like, we had an imagination and we used it. Let's just go with that.
So we had designed and we had developed, the SBWF, as it was known at the time, the SBWF Championship Belt. And so now that we have the characters, we have the name, we have the championship belts, we've got everything in place to start out with of how SMIW eventually would become, and that's the starting point. And once we got those things in place, then we start incorporating other people. Tony had a couple other friends that liked professional wrestling, wanted to get involved with this backyard thing that we were trying to start. And so at that time, he started incorporating another guy named Harley Hamden, who would become known as the Punisher. We would get a guy named John Hartline, who would go as the Destroyer. And there was a couple other people involved there at that time. And so we started really getting something put together here. The only thing that we hadn't got to at that time was for that first year and a half. So when we first started in June of 2004, and for the first year and a half, so this is the winter of 2005/2006, we weren't able to film anything because we didn't have a camera, but that would become the next step. So it was in the winter of 2005 and 2006, I was finally able to get my hands on a camcorder. And it was one that I borrowed from my folks, and it wasn't like one of these little small handheld camcorders that you see nowadays. This thing was huge, and for those that remember the VHS tapes, the entire tape slid into this camera. The thing was huge, and because of how big it was, and we had to use a cord because the battery packs didn't work, we had to use a cord and an extension cord. It really limited our mobility, but it was at least a start. So we start filming some of the matches at Tony's house on his trampoline. And the very first matches that we filmed, the first one was myself against Harley Hamden, who was the Punisher. And we filmed a second match that night. It was me against Tony.
Oh.
And looking back on those tapes now, they're kind of hard to watch, but again, everything has to have a starting point. And once we filmed those two matches, and I could go back and watch those and see what it was that we looked like, what we were doing, I realized right then and there after those two matches, we had to start filming everything. And on top of filming everything, I wanted to start having some kind of originality. I wanted it to right away. It was almost even subconscious now that I think back on it, but I wanted things to look a lot more legit and a lot more serious than just a couple kids jumping around on a trampoline. It only took those 2 matches on tape for me to start already generating this. So we ditched the idea of the really cheesy and corny World Heavyweight Championship belt that we were using that I made. I would make some similar to that for other championship belts as we continue to progress, but for the main championship belt, I wanted something that looked more real. So I went out and bought, it was a replica of the ECW World Heavyweight Championship belt. And the reason I got that one is my stance at the time was, for one, it was a little cheaper than a lot of the other ones, but the main thing of why I wanted that particular one was because at the time, ECW was no longer on television, hadn't been in a long time, so it would be a championship belt that we could use that wasn't used on TV all the time, hadn't been on TV, wasn't something as recognizable, so that's what we went with. We did end up having a little hiccup right around that time, and that was that Daniel, he started to get into music, which he's doing great with nowadays, and that was the start of that for him. And he started focusing on that a little bit, and he left. And before he left, Harley left, and John left, and it came down to just me and Tony. And so there was, for a moment there was a chance that SMIW, that we know it as today, may have never existed, because at that time, when it came down to just me and Tony, we were the only 2 left, and we just wrestled each other a couple times here and there off camera, just, to keep something going. But luckily for us, we caught a little bit of a break because a friend of Daniel's, Tommy Bustle, came in, and we were talking to him at the house one day, and I showed him a couple of the videos that we had shot with myself and Harley and Tony, and he was interested, and he showed interest in wanting to come in and be a part of it. And since he wanted to become a part of it, Daniel decided to come back in and join as well. So we were able to get the 4 of us together and, start revitalizing it again and try to bring it back from the brink. Once Daniel came back in and Tommy got involved, things really started to pick up then. The wrestling then got moved from Tony's house to mine and Daniel's house, where we had easier access to that camera and we could film things more often. And we started doing sporadic wrestling matches either after school during the week or occasionally during the weekend or something. And so we started putting more matches together with those guys involved and with the 4 of us. And it very rapidly started to grow into something else altogether, where we would do something sporadically, and then we started getting some music involved for the entrances, started developing the characters a little bit more, their story arcs, and very rapidly started doing more matches and more matches and more matches. And the more that we got to do and the more that we got to film, the more that we got invested in it and really thought to ourselves, okay, let's see what we can really do here. And very quickly it went from sporadic to doing a weekly show that we called Thursday Night War. And we started doing 2 matches per show with a couple little promos in there. And that was the first time, and this is early 2006 now at this point, that we really started developing the show aspect of what was SBWF at the time.
We brought in some more belts. I think at that time we had the SBWF championship. I know we brought in the Hardcore championship. I think we had a U.S. championship as well, and also the Deathmatch championship. So there was 4 of us at that time, and all 4 of us had a belt. I don't know. I mean, we were all champions right here,
That really early stage was critical. Once we moved it from Tony's to our house, we didn't have a trampoline either. I mean, we were doing it right on the ground. we would be slamming each other on the ground. We'd be suplexing each other off the deck, the back porch of the house.
But yeah, it was just straight on the ground. I mean, like suplexes, DDTs, all that stuff, just straight on the ground. And, to do like a hardcore match for the hardcore championship, we just grabbed like whatever we could out of the house.
It really started to get a little bit more physical and a little bit more technical as far as what a show could be. And then once we started doing Thursday Night War every week, we could start develop the storylines. And then obviously we weren't doing pay-per-views, but our version of pay-per-views we just simply called major events, and we started running them once a month. So we had a full schedule at that point, a weekly show every week to, put these shows together, plus the major shows every month. And in a very quick time frame, things really started to develop and become SMIW. Once we got the weekly shows going, we also incorporated a trampoline at our house as well. So we went from the ground to the trampoline, we had this weekly show, and then we started to develop some storylines, some of the real first storylines, stuff like the CEO against Fear, the brothers, Pain and Fear, against each other, some alliances beginning to form, that sort of thing. The storylines, along with the character development, was a big part of moving things to the next level. But if we really wanted to get to that next level, I realized very quickly, after just doing a couple shows of Thursday Night War on a trampoline, I realized that if I really want this to look like something, if I really want this to kind of, be taken seriously, doing it on a trampoline isn't going to do it. The trampoline is, I felt very childish. It didn't look legit. It looked like some kid just jumping around and, having some fun. That's not what wrestling looks like. So I knew right away that we needed a change. We needed something else beside a trampoline that made it look more legit. So we kind of developed a wrestling ring, but it wasn't like an actual ring with like the posts and the ropes. The posts and the ropes were missing.
The trampoline just doesn't look good for that kind of thing. So we actually convinced our parents to let us build a ring. Unfortunately, we were never able, they would never let us build ropes. But we had a ring. We had a mat of sorts to actually do this stuff on. It's a fairly fond memory because it was building it was something that me, my brother, and my dad, just us three did. But the design of this thing sounded great at the time. We thought it would be like perfect, a layer of tires. The tires got a little bit of give to them. They're rubber, okay? And then, some pallets on that, some plywood on that, and some carpet padding and a tarp. This shouldn't hurt too bad. That thing was so unforgiving at times. Like there were some soft spots in it, but yeah, we finally had a ring. I think we were all pretty proud of that ring. It was something that we could actually use and make our stuff look that much more, at least in our eyes at that time, legitimate.
I recognized and realized from that very first show that we filmed on the platform looked so much better than a trampoline. So we were already heading in the right direction. In a very short time, we realized that we could only have our couple characters wrestle each other so many times before we were going to be completely out of ideas. So we had tried to bring in a couple other people here and there. It just wasn't working out. And so it kept just coming down to me, Tony, Daniel, and Tommy. And we were trying to think to ourselves, how do we build up this roster? We never really were, any of us, very popular in school. We didn't have a lot of other friends, especially ones that were into professional wrestling as we were. And so we felt that there was only one way to be able to fix this problem. And we kind of had an expansion, but we did it from within. So what we had done is we started developing secondary characters to fill out our roster. And so I brought in Michael Ralston, who was Michael Hardy at the time. Daniel brought in Trismagia.
I can't handle that character even still to this day, because I had these like compression shorts that I wore when I ran track in middle school, and I cut the leg off of one of them because they were like spandex material. I cut the leg off of one of them, cut holes in it, and put it over my face. So like the thing, I think I lost brain cells from that mask because it was just so tight, and like my face was like this all the time, and it just looked goofy as hell because I had like a little mushroom sticking out of the top because it was a leg. You know, it wasn't actually a mask. So yeah, it was pretty good though. It was funny. And then I had Dad's waiter boots, you know, these rubber boots that went all the way up to my knees.
Tony brought in Madness. Tommy brought in Nevin. And so just by playing multiple wrestlers and multiple characters, we doubled our roster and therefore doubled what we were capable of as far as character developments and storylines, story arcs, and being able to, you know, rotate some of these characters in and out to be able to have more leeway with what it is that we wanted to do. No sooner did we do this character expansion, and this is like maybe May of 2006 now, we lost Tommy. Tommy decided that he no longer wanted to do this with us, and he left. And so it was back down to me, Daniel, and Tony once again. But right around that same time period, though, a good friend of mine had recently moved from Kentucky back up to Michigan, and we'd known each other a long time. And he decided to come in, and his name was Nick Conner.
I moved to Kentucky, and I spent a great deal of my early teenage years, my late teenage years, and even part of my 20s moving back and forth between here in Michigan and in Kentucky. We moved down there right pretty much as I started my freshman year of high school, pretty much like at the back half of my 8th grade year. And that I was excited to go, but I was really bummed that I wasn't going to be able to hang out with my friends, you know, Tony and Dwayne, and I knew it was, you know, going to be a struggle for me. So when I came back in 2006, we moved back. There was some family stuff at the time that gave me the opportunity to move back. So, you know, me and my mom and brother and everybody, we came back up here for a little bit. And while I was up here, Dwayne and brother Daniel, they started doing the wrestling already and wanted me to be a part of it. And I, at the time, couldn't have been more excited to do something because it was like I never left. Like I never disappeared, like I never went anywhere. And was welcomed right back into, you know, their lives and doing whatever they were doing, and we were still wrestling, still able to do what we always liked doing. So, you know, and that I was only back for a short period of time, so nothing was really cemented or concrete then.
And Nick Conner would come in and play multiple characters right off the bat for us. He would come in as Zeus, who would later become Nick Thunder, and he would also bring in Panic.
To me, it was awesome because I got to be things I never thought about being before. Zeus got to be the epitome of that. I had both Zeus and Panic, actually. Both those character names and who those characters were derived directly from like old Greek mythology and stuff like that. You know, I mean, Zeus, that's an obvious one. Panic is, you know, Dwayne already had a character named Pain. And I had considered being Panic and developed that character because of the right and left hands of Hades. The Greek mythology Hades, you know, basically underworld ruler, and these characters were dark characters. I mean, if Pain was was our equivalent of, say, the Undertaker, then Panic was my equivalent of Kane, and he was supposed to be a silent but deadly character, kind of as an offset to Zeus, who would actually have a mouth, you know, and be a little bit more animated. So when I got my start doing that, that was kind of where those characters came from.
So we lost Tommy and the two personas that he was playing, but we gained Nick maybe a week or two later, who also brought in 2 characters, so we were able to kind of swap them out in a sense. And when he did that, not only did it replace Tommy's personas, but we didn't realize at the time how big of a staple Nick would become in SMIW at that time and basically for the rest of history. So I think it worked out in the end, and we were able to just continue on with Nick now in the fold. It was also right around this time that I wanted the United States Championship to really mean something. So we ditched the handmade design that I'd come up with and got, a small size United States Championship belt, to use for that, which the United States Championship would later become a staple in its own right, just as much as the World Championship, from basically about that point on for the rest of history. And with the incorporation of that, not only we were doing the weekly shows, not only we were doing the monthly shows, the big major events, but I wanted something that was our Starrcade, our WrestleMania, our big thing for the year, and we came up with Apocalypse. When we came up with Apocalypse, it just so happened that it was the month of June, and June of 2004 was when we really kind of started this whole thing. So Apocalypse originally started as kind of just like a 2-year anniversary special, and it would later become our biggest event of the year and what we really tried to build up to, and make the big spectacle, or the biggest show that we could every single year. So in June of 2006, we had all these things going for us, and Apocalypse was going to be our flagship major event and program, and so that's where that all started. So we were really getting the structure under control and was really starting to do some really cool things at this time. After Apocalypse, we go a couple more months. It's about late August. Things are going pretty well. We were doing some, interesting things storyline-wise, doing some interesting things with some of the characters, really trying to find our footing and trying to see what we could and couldn't get away with as far as some of the physicality or some of the maneuvers that we were trying to do, things like that. Just really trying to get a feel for exactly what it was that we could or couldn't do and were comfortable with doing. And, with a couple of the storyline ideas, one of the big ones that we attempted to do at the time was a company split. We had thought that, we wanted to shake things up a bit. And so what had happened was Daniel, using his main character as Fear, decided that he was going to separate himself from the SBWF. He was going to create his own promotion, and that promotion was called the FOE, or the Federation of Extreme. And he would turn several of SBWF's main personas and characters, against the company to kind of join this rebellious other company.
Fear was going to start a rogue promotion that was going to invade SBWF, and part of the reason why I wanted to do that was because I still hated the fucking name. And I decided to come up with FOE, and it was the Federation of Extreme, which really isn't any better. It's really not. But we started having this separate war between the two promotions, and I think we even went as far as to do separate FOE and separate SBWF shows, and then we'd combine them for our pay-per-views and stuff like that. We'd have, different characters and wrestlers from each show invading the other one and all that kind of stuff.
I have to go get ready for my matchup as Fear against Havoc.
Oh!
Yeah.
What the?
Michael Hardy!
Hey!
What in the world is he doing?
It was basically our way of living out WWE's invasion angle when we were kids.
When I left for that couple of months, I was able to come back, and they started a whole second branding almost, kind of like the differences Raw and SmackDown, just about, it seemed like, and started a whole other branding, so I was able to introduce another character.
And so we were able to split the companies up, and the idea was to be able to create a major storyline between the two companies going to war. On top of the FOE would have its own separate show, SBWF would have its own separate show, so we could have intertwining feuds and rivalries going on each individual show, plus the major company war at the same time.
Tonight is going to be a great show because tonight is where the FOE beats the SBWF.
It was a very complex idea that, looking back on, I'm not sure if we completely pulled off. I would have liked to have revisited that and done it maybe a little bit better later on. But it was a kind of a drastic move that we felt like we needed to do to shake some things up and try something new. But it was also around this time, so about early September, we kind of took our first big blow. Tony, for one reason or another, just stopped coming around. He didn't speak to us much, and he had started coming around sporadically as well. He had missed a couple shows and just wasn't seeming like himself, and we really didn't know why. He really wasn't talking to us, and eventually by early September of 2006, he just stopped coming around, and we really didn't speak to him after that.
Unfortunately, I guess we didn't really see much of Tony after that. He was a very, very close friend of mine when we were young. And a lot of this wrestling stuff involved him and, you know, doing it at his place and hanging out with him. And it was awesome for me as a kid to have that friendship and everything. So it was pretty disappointing for me that he wasn't around at the back half of that.
I'm not sure exactly what happened. I don't know really where he went. At the time of filming this, it has been like nearly 13 years, and I still haven't ever spoke to him. He just kind of disappeared, and we never really knew why. But, you know, we had lost Tony, and that was a big blow, because, again, when we originally started this in 2004, it was me, Tony, and Daniel, and it was kind of like we were the Three Musketeers. You know, we were the originators of SBWF, or ultimately SMIW, and without him being there, it really felt odd for a little while. You know, it was strange not having that third guy, that third original guy around.
You know, life is life. You know, and everybody's got their own past to live and lead, and, you know, you never know what's going to happen. So, I just kind of, you know, wonder what it'd been like, you know, if some of the other people had stuck around more and did it more often, you know, how much more we could have potentially accomplished. Because one of the great things about what we've done then and what we've done up to this date is doing so much with so little. We did an awful lot, very short-handed. And not just for me, because I was in and out of the picture quite a bit throughout the years. So, you know, just as a props to D and his brother, they managed to hold everything together, pretty much just the two of them, you know, with very limited means for a long time. So that was once again, very much just a great honor to be a part of all that and seeing it last through all of the things that it had to go through, particularly, you know, when it comes down to Tony being an OG, if you will, and starting the whole thing, and, you know, how quickly, you know, things change.
We did have Nick to kind of fill that void. Plus, we also lost Tommy. We had tried to bring in a couple other people that, you know, showed up maybe once or twice and then never came back. So I think at this point it was just me, Dwayne, and Nick, and that's kind of how it ran for a good while.
This thing has always it seemed like revolved around a group of 3 people. And you'll have some other guys kind of float in and out. And for the first 2 years, a little over 2 years, it was me, Daniel, and Tony. And then once Tony was gone, Nick stepped into Tony's spot, and it became the 3 of us, me, Daniel, and Nick. And so, I was very grateful for Nick to step up, kind of take that role, and he, really started doing some really good stuff with us. And if Nick wouldn't have been around right then, who knows? That once again may have been the end of SMIW right then and there. But I'm very thankful that he was around at the time and that he stepped up the way that he did. Once we lost Tony and it was back to just me, Daniel, and Nick, we realized that the FOE storyline, that split, was really stretching us thin. And so, unfortunately, we only just ended that story after only about a 2-month period.
That whole thing stretched our pool of characters and stuff kind of thin. I think we were back to doing like maybe 2 matches per show or something like that. So, yeah, it eventually, I don't really remember exactly why we decided to put an end to that. It was probably just because the angle had run its course, and we wanted to get back to just doing one show and do what we could with one show.
And so we brought everything back together. It was just the 3 of us with, trying to play multiple personas and characters. And then we started developing a new problem, and it wasn't a problem that we could help. It wasn't anything that we can really do anything about, but the days started to get shorter with the loss of daylight, time change. And so filming got to be very difficult. We ended up starting, shooting shows during the daytime. And, by the time we got to the end of the show, it was pitch black outside. It was already getting dark. So it was very hard for us to get an entire show in and get filmed all during the daytime. So, that really started to become a problem. With the loss of daylight, and it was also getting to work its way into winter season, it's starting to get a lot colder. Nick had come up with a suggestion of, doing like a season finale, and we do the show kind of like in a seasonal basis, from spring to fall. That is a season. During the winter, we just don't do it because it's hard on the electrical equipment. We had extension cords everywhere, wrestling in the snow, in the cold. It's hard on the lungs. It's wet. It's very uncomfortable.
I mean, this is Michigan. It gets dumb shit cold in the winter. And, nobody really wants to wrestle in that, even though we would have been the guys willing to get hypothermia to do this.
Wintertime was coming up. It was getting colder. We didn't want to freeze our asses off. And I think by that time already, the ring was already in need of repair. So it was at that time we took a break. And
it just makes sense to kind of keep some of that condensed. We lose daylight early. So, and at the time, our recording and production and everything wasn't the best in the world because we were still pretty much just teenagers. We didn't have access to everything in the world, and the internet, hadn't invented YouTube and all that crap yet. So filming at night would have been, and always was, a pain. We had done it several times. We filmed at night even throughout the years. We had done several night episodes. Some of them are decent for their own reasons and causes, but it's always better to have daylight on your side and at least a little bit of warmth.
So he decided, to bring up this idea of doing a seasonal system, and, thinking about it, and, me and Daniel agreed, it made sense.
It kind of gives us a little bit of a decent break, and it allows us time to overlook what we've been doing and how we're doing it, and, possibly prevent us from injury and things like that, because we've gotten lucky through all the years not, avoiding at least any true serious injuries. We've got longevity, injuries now, but I mean, at least at the time, nobody, got severely hurt.
So we decided to wrap up season 1, as we then called it, in November with The Last Stand. We still had the same problem. It got dark way too fast. The show itself was but, that system, that seasonal system that he just kind of suggested, all at once, we would take and use for basically the remainder of any time we ever did any of this, no matter what incarnation it was, whether it was SBWF, SMIW, whatever. That seasonal system, at least where we live here in Michigan, actually works out very well for us. So that's what we decided to do. We wrapped up season 1 pretty decent on the strongest note that we could. And, look forward to doing season 2 and taking that bar and raising that bar just a little bit higher. So all the way up through to the end of 2006, we experimented with bringing in other people. By the time March of 2007 rolls around and it was time for open season and season 2, it was back down to me, Daniel, and Nick again. The other couple people had either fallen off before November, or they had fallen off during the off season between November and March. And it was at that point, it was at that time that myself, Daniel, and Nick, we kind of just thought to ourselves and kind of just decided, look, bringing in other people just isn't going to work. We have a chemistry between the three of us. We enjoy doing this together. We know what we want to do. Let's just do it ourselves. That's ultimately what we did. And we started really doing some pretty decent stuff in the beginning of season 2.
In 07 was the beginning of just us three carrying out a program. It's just 3 people without any true intention of adding extras or doing more. We realized that between the 3 of us that we could do enough alone. Didn't need a whole lot of extra input. And if anybody else did want to come around, of course we were open to it. But
on top of, just getting it down to just the 3 of us, the 3 Musketeers, we restructured the ring platform. So now it's a little taller. It's a little more stable.
Yeah, going back into what's officially now the second season of the SBWF era, we had to repair the ring. But anyway, our fix was basically just throw another layer of pallets and another layer of OSB on top of it. Good enough.
But on top of it being stable, it was a lot stiffer. But, the ring platform really looked good. We were starting to develop our characters a lot more into something that we really, really enjoyed. We had multiple characters. We were putting some decent matches together.
To me, 07 is a catalyst for a lot of things. Because it was a catalyst for our character development. It was a catalyst for our production. And it was a catalyst for how we handled each other and our growth as, dare I say, athletes. I mean, I can't really beat around the bush on that too much. We were, even though we were amateurs, we were still doing it and doing a decent job of it for, just some schmoes in the backyard.
I had finally invested in a brand new camera. We were able to walk around the ring a little bit more. All the way through 2006, we were using that really heavy, large, outdated camcorder. I had something smaller that, we didn't have to have the cord and the extension cord, and we were limited on our mobility. With a smaller camera, we were able to get around the ring. We were able to get different viewpoints, really get up in there into the action. So that helped out a lot. So we did open season. We did, I think Thursday Night War had eventually moved to Friday nights, even sometime back in 2006. But we're doing the Friday Night War shows. We're doing the major events. We get through open season. We get through the gauntlet. Things are looking good. We're really starting to fire on all cylinders, right? Unfortunately, things don't always go the way that we want them to. It was late April, early May of 2007. Nick and I had a falling out. We had some personal problems. The details I'm not going to get into. That business was between him and I as part of our personal history. But we were not seeing eye to eye at the time. And, it had gotten kind of personal.
There was difficult tension between me and Dwayne for personal reasons. Not something I think is appropriate, with sharing with anyone, and we've buried that dirt, and we did a good job of burying that.
We were scheduled to do Ultimate Insanity, which was our May major event, on the 11th of May, and I remember he came by. We discussed things for what seemed like several hours, and by the time we kind of got things situated, it was about midnight.
We filmed that one pretty late. I do remember that. I do remember it being a late show because we had a lot of discussion that took place before that.
I remember sitting there in the room with him, and I think Daniel was there too, and said, do you guys still want to do this show? And I needed it to happen. I needed Ultimate Insanity still to happen that night because I needed to take my mind off of things that was going on. And I think Nick could have felt the same way. So we found some, spotlights and some extension cords, and we lit up the backyard as best we could. And we went out there and we still put on the show.
We still did it, despite the problems we were having personally in our lives. We still did it. We still did the show, still had our matches.
Nick and I were scheduled to face each other on 2 different occasions that night. And, I can't speak for him on where he felt or what he felt at the time. I know that I had felt terrible about the entire thing. I felt that, deep down that he was probably extremely angry with me. And to his credit, I think to both of our credits, we were still brothers and we were still going to be professionals, and we went out in that ring and we still took care of each other.
The great thing about that is we didn't take any cheap shots. I didn't take any cheap shots, and I don't recall Dwayne taking any cheap shots with his characters either. We still cared about the product. We still cared about making a show. We still cared about making it look as good as we could make it look at the time. And despite our flaws and despite our dispositions at the time and our attitudes towards each other, still made it work.
He was a professional. I was a professional. We were professionals. We went out in the ring and we did what it is that we were supposed to do, even though it was very late at night, and everything that had transpired between us at that time. And we got through the show. The show was what it was.
And so unfortunately that was my close in 07. And I wouldn't hit the ring again for a couple of years.
That show marked the end of an era for us for a long time. Because after that night, Nick and I didn't speak for over a year. After Ultimate Insanity and Nick had left, it was down to just me and Daniel. And we didn't know what the future held right away for the SBWF. And sat down and we were like, how can we continue the show? And do we want to continue the show? I wanted to continue the show. He did too. And so it was decided that, we're not just going to let this fade away because of this. We're going to find a way to do this. And find a way we did.
We still had this drive to do this thing that we had, invested time in, all that stuff in. So we actually ended up convincing our dad to film for us.
We asked my dad, who was gracious enough to take over the camera duties and eventually even started incorporating some commentary in there for us. So since this entire thing has always operated with 3 people, we had to have 3. So 2 in the ring, 1 behind the camera. My dad was generous enough to step up and take the camera so that Daniel and I could still get on this ring platform and do our thing, something that we really enjoyed doing. And so when it comes right down to it, our dad saved the show at that point.
I remember, I think it was actually Mom actually had a camera, and she was taking pictures for us too at the time. So it was a whole family affair at this point. It was just me, my brother, my dad, my mom. It's just like all of us, whether you guys want to do this stuff or not. Mom, here's the camera, take pictures for us. And then my dad, I think he still had some fun with it, whether he wanted to admit it or not, because we ended up doing a ladder match. And so we were sitting there, I think me and Dwayne were talking one night about, man, I really wish we could do a ladder match. And so Dad got this idea to take 2 extension ladders and ratchet strap them and anchor them to the ground around the ring and put a cable across it and everything. So it's like, Dad was a wrestling fan growing up too. He was into Hulk Hogan and Andre. And so, I don't know. I think I would like to think maybe he somewhat appreciated what we were doing and wanted to help us out, how he could.
So once we knew that my dad was going to take over the camera, we also felt that we needed to replace the characters that Nick had left behind. And so Daniel and I create even more characters. I bring in Morpheus. He brings in Alex Syndicate.
Me and Dwayne both were running 4 characters apiece at that time. And, let's see, I had Fear was still around. And then I had Jacob Williams. I had Trismagia, I think, still. And then Dante. And let's see, I also had Alex Syndicate.
We're doing sometimes 3 or 4 or even 5 matches in one night on one show. So we still kept, how much content we were producing, but with just less bodies. It was just me and him. So we tried so hard to keep this thing going with just the 2 of us, but with bringing in these other characters, it was very physically demanding on the both of us. The storylines were getting a little better at the time. The storylines, I think, were, really improving. The physicality, that Daniel and I were bringing to each other was really going up a few notches. Some of the stuff was really physical, really well done.
It was at this point, I think actually the previous season, we did manage to convince our parents to allow us to use tables. But I know the second year we started to get a little bit more creative with that. And I remember yours truly here went through the first ever double-decker table. That was pretty sweet. And my mom actually captured a picture of me, right before I'm going through the table. So that was pretty sweet.
But the amount of what we were doing, I don't think we realized it at the time. The amount that we were doing, the amount of matches we were doing, the physicality that we were really bringing was really starting to wear on us. And, this platform, it had no give. The way that it was built, it was like being body slammed on your back porch with a layer of carpet on the top and a tarp thrown over the top of it, and so that's what we were wrestling on 4 or 5 times in a show, in one day, with really high impact spots and maneuvers. And we didn't realize it, I don't think, at the time, but we were really starting to wear our bodies down trying to keep this show going. But we still had that love for it. We still had that passion for it. And we wanted it to succeed. With the help of our dad behind the camera, Daniel and I, we pressed on. We went through the rest of May, through June, July, August, and then finally we found ourselves in September of 2007. And September is Daniel's birthday, but it's also my older brother's birthday. You know, I have an older brother, Daryl, who is not with us, and I wanted to do something special. I wanted to do something that I felt would mean a lot to him. You know, if he looks down upon us, you know, I believe that he's protected me several times. Wanted to do something special for him, and so we put together the Daryl Rothman tribute show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Daryl Rothman tribute show.
It was a show for him in his memory that, you know, that I wanted to do. I felt very strongly about it. I had some family and friends there, you know, that kind of supported the show, and you know, but we did that just for him, just for Daryl. And I don't even know if he really would have been a wrestling fan or not, but it was a skill that Daniel and I felt that we had, and we just wanted to do this for him in his memory, doing something that we enjoy doing, something that we felt that we were very good at doing, and kind of just do it in his name, in his honor, in his memory, just to let him know that we're thinking about it. It was around the time of the tribute show for Daryl that I realized that the fire that we had was beginning to fade. The shows weren't happening on a regular basis like they used to. They were beginning to happen on like random dates, random days even. They went from like Saturdays to occasionally, you know, Sundays here and there, and it just wasn't as regular. The shows were getting shorter and shorter, and I remember a couple of the shows only had one match on them, and that was it. It was very physically demanding, and I think we were starting to get burnt out. The fun factor had really worn out by that point. It just wasn't quite the same anymore. I felt like when we were doing the shows, no matter how long or short they were, we were still putting together good matches. We were still putting together decent shows. But the morale was kind of starting to drop, and it started to feel more and more like a job, and instead of something that we really enjoyed. It was really beginning to take its toll. But we pressed on through September, through October, and, you know, at the beginning of that winter season again, and we finished off season 2 with The Last Stand, and we had every intention on starting season 3 back up in the spring. And, you know, we did what we could, but it really was beginning to wear on us. We could feel it every time that we went to put a show together. We go through the winter, we go through the off season, and season 3 was set to begin the following March, just like it had the year before, and it just never did. 1 week went by, another week went by, another week, and eventually it became clear that it just wasn't going to. it just never started. And I think it's just, Daniel and I, we were tired. We were tired that those several months, just him and I, were so physically and mentally challenging and demanding. It was rough on us. And I don't know how my dad felt about it. I'm not really sure if he wanted to continue filming for us or not. I don't know.
I think towards the end of that, I think Dad didn't want to film it anymore, and that had kind of run its course. And plus me and my brother, we were starting to kind of run out of, not necessarily run out of ideas, but there was only so much we could do with just us two. So it was at that, and the ring was still falling apart.
It was rough on Daniel and I to continue it by ourselves, but still, with how mentally or physically demanding or draining it could have been, I still didn't want it to end. Over the last couple years prior to that, from 2004 and those 2.5, 3 years, whatever it was, it was more than just a hobby for me. I hadn't realized it, but over the course of June of 2004, when we began, to early May of 2008, those 2 seasons, and all the matches that we had, all the moments that we had, the characters that we had built up, the promotion, that we had built up from a couple kids on a trampoline to, these young adults, now, who were evolving in their own right, how they had evolved this into, this product that it had become. And it wasn't just a hobby for me anymore. It had developed into a passion that I wanted to pursue, that I wanted to see continue to grow and really see where it could go, what we could do with this if we continue to push it on and on. And so finally I asked Daniel, I said, do you think that we're ever going to get this 3rd season underway? And he said, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. And again, I think he was burnt out. He was tired. I could tell by the end of season 2 that, it had worn him out. And I think he was just ready to put it to rest and, pursue something else. And I can't do it on my own. So I had lobbied for us to do one last show to kind of be like a series finale of a TV show or something, like, an end, just an ending to the whole thing. And so in May of 2008, we put together the final showdown. The final showdown, we had 6 matches. It was the biggest cards that we had ever done. So Daniel and I, we wrestled 6 times on this one day. We bring out all the characters. We pull out all the stops. Looking back at it today, it wasn't our strongest show, but there was also like 6 months or more between the last stand and the final showdown. So we didn't get a chance to kind of work the ring rust off, but we still did the best that we could with it. We really brought it, and we wanted this to be as special as we could. And finally, at the end of the day, at the conclusion of the final showdown, a week or 2 later, myself, Daniel, and my dad, we tore the ring apart, and it was official. It was done. It was finally over, and SBWF had folded, and it was done. Once SBWF folds, about 2 years go by, and we're living the normal life, the bills, the job, the apartment, the etc. all the regular things, I felt that something was missing. You know, I was missing something in my life. Luckily, Nick and I, we were able to patch up our differences after, it was about a year or so after, our issue that we had. And
when 2010 rolled around, I had a great opportunity to patch up my friendship with Dwayne, and that was good. That was real good, and I felt real good about it. And it led to this, having the opportunity to hang out and speak again, and face to face and in person.
I think there was one particular night that was at my apartment. He was there. I believe Daniel was there. Or this might have taken place over a couple different weekends. I don't recall exactly now. But we were just, sitting in the apartment, plugging in the old SBWF tapes, and we start having these conversations here and there, and talking about how cool it would be to see what would happen if we would have continued SBWF, see what would have happened if we would have kept it going, where would it be now, or what else could we have done that would change into, well, what if we ever had the chance to start it up again? That'd be kind of cool. What could we do with it? And eventually, those talks about what if became talks of can we? And the discussion started to get more serious.
Just watching, the tapes and videos of us wrestling in the past, we kept talking about how cool it would be to do it again and how much better we think we could do it.
We decided if we had the chance, if we had the ability, and we could pull it off, then we ought to give it a shot.
After talking about it enough and reminiscing enough, and, as all of this wrestling stuff being Dwayne's child. I mean, if he ever gave birth to anything in life to this point, this is it. It's a true passion project.
I don't know. We all had this idea that we had this itch, watching the old tapes, remembering how fun it was. We decided we wanted to give it another shot.
So where I was staying at the time, I was in an apartment that it essentially was my landlord. It was their house. Their home was on the bottom level, and they turned the top level into apartment all to itself.
His apartment was like a duplex. The landlord lived in the bottom, and my brother lived up top. So he had a pretty decent-sized yard and everything. So it was actually at this dude's house, essentially.
So I decided, you know what? I'm going to take a shot at this. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to talk to them and see if they'll let me build a wrestling ring in their backyard. I figured, if nothing else, all they can do is tell me no. I went down there expecting them to tell me no. And I remember this conversation, and I told them what I wanted to do, what my brother wanted to do, what my friend wanted to do. What we wanted to collectively do is build a wrestling ring in their backyard and do a backyard wrestling show. And I remember my landlord at first said, well, yeah, if you want to just, throw something out there in the backyard, as long as you pick it up when you're done. I said, no, you don't quite understand. We want to build a ring, a wrestling ring in your backyard. It ain't just going to come back down. We want to build a structure in your backyard to be able to do this wrestling show with. And I remember he thought about it for a little while. He eventually said, okay, go ahead.
So my brother somehow manages to convince his landlord to build another one in the backyard.
And as shocked as I was, I went back to Daniel, I went back to Nick, and I said, he gave us the green light. Let's get this thing going. And they were as shocked as I was, but we're game. We're all up for it. And so it was at that point I took the money I was making from the job, and I purchased some materials and, decided to build this ring and decided to resurrect my pride and joy, my passion, and give it another go. So once my landlord gave me the okay to build something in the backyard, I instantly knew that I wanted this go-round to be bigger and better than anything that we had done with the SBWF material. So we started putting this ring together.
We went with the old tried and true design, man. Tires, pallets, and OSB, buddy. It worked for 2 years. Tried again. But this time I think we got some more tires, some more pallets, and like we kind of refined the design a little bit.
My landlord liked to put some things together, and so we were talking about, the old ring or the old platform, and said, we'd really love to have some ring posts, some ring ropes, really make this thing look as best we can in the way that it should. And so he suggested even, cementing these, posts into the ground. So now, not only is he letting us build the thing, he's letting us cement posts in his backyard. If my landlord wouldn't have agreed to all of these different things, this never would have happened.
We got some ropes. We actually had ring ropes this time. And I remember me, Dwayne, and Nick having a long conversation, like multiple nights, I think, this went on, of exactly how we were going to build the ring and how to do the ropes and, everything like that.
And this is not like anything we ever had before. This thing was built on ideas of the past with upgrades and futuristic plan. And for the first time in wrestling, it was developed with ropes. And that was sweet.
Yeah, we got ropes this time. They're beautiful. They're lovely. They're black and they spring. Yeah.
Now we had another platform. We had the ring ropes, the ring posts and the ring ropes. And so we really felt that with this setup, with this ring setup, the sky was the limit. We could really do something now. And we had a new ring, and so I went and spent some more money and got yet another camera, a newer camera, so that we could try to have even better quality than what we did before with the SBWF stuff. So I wanted it to look good. I wanted the production to look good. So the new ring, which allowed us to do a lot more things that we ever could before. A new camera, and on top of that, we wanted a new name. It was decided that the old SBWF, that Suicidal Backyard Wrestling Federation name, was old and outdated. It didn't age well. We didn't really care for it, so we decided to rename the entire product and became known as the XWF, which stood for the Extreme Wrestling Federation. So after doing these things, building this ring, renaming the product, a new camera, we built a little entranceway on top of that, which we never had before.
We had the entrance closet, which, that thing was awesome.
And so we were set to put on our very first show on April 11th of 2010. And I couldn't ask for much better of a show than what we did. It's like all three of us, me, Nick, and Daniel, it was just three of us again, just like it was in the old days. The Three Musketeers were back, and we put on some really good matches. The characters really looked good. The matches that we put together with, and on this new ring setup, we were able to do some more stuff that we ever could before. The show flowed very well.
We'd go out, we do our matches. We'd usually have like 4 or 5, because we brought back a lot of the old characters and stuff. Kind of just picked up where we left off. But because of the ropes and all that stuff, and really at this time, because when we lived at home, there were certain things we couldn't say, there were certain things we couldn't do. Our parents only let us do so much in that regard. So we were on our own at this point, So, like, all of these limitations were gone now.
That made me feel so good. The whole thing, I was able to see it in a very short time kind of rise from the ashes a couple years after the fact that it had died off into a new and improved, evolved version. And it was better than anything. Instantly, that first show was instantly better than anything else that we had ever done.
It was better than anything we had done to that point. And that's one of the coolest things about what we've done, is that every time we come back to doing it, we do it just a little bit better. It's that little bit more, that little bit extra that makes it that much sweeter.
As soon as that show was over, I was on cloud 9. I felt alive. It was just unfortunate that we never would have known how the XWF was going to turn out based on that first show, because that first show was so good. Unfortunately, it just couldn't last. Looking back on that 2010 XWF run, it just seems like it was destined to fail. It was cursed from the start. We made several mistakes very early that wasn't ever going to work. The first show was so good, and it gave me such high hopes that maybe I expected too much. I tried to do too much, and it didn't ultimately work. And then on top of that, Nick didn't show on the second week. He didn't make the second show. And so therefore we had no cameraman, so we tried to just prop the camera up on something. It was horrible. The ropes were coming apart. We had to keep trying to improvise. It just wasn't working. And then with work getting in the way, just life getting in the way, we were pushing shows back. We were moving them to different days. We tried to do the same thing as we had done before with a weekly show, the monthly show, and basically picked up right where we left off. That was one of the big mistakes. I didn't realize it at that time.
Filming a episode, doing a couple of matches, filming it, and it would take all day, and we'd be exhausted. Even more so for Dwayne, because he'd get off a shift of work and then come out and just start pounding the canvas. And it was, again, I have a lot of respect for him even at that time for being willing to do that.
We end up having to do one show in the dark because, I ended up having to work. I couldn't get out of it. We ended up having to, improvise some nightly show. It didn't really go very well. The whole thing was falling apart so rapidly. And then 2 months into the XWF run, Nick stops coming. He stops coming around. And, back then, this was 2010. He was 20 years old. Him and I are the same age. We were both still young. He had some different priorities at the time.
I was 20 years old. And life I was leading at that time was very distracting. To keep things in a box. It was a very distracting period of my life. And things unfolded. After that couple of months of my life, personally, and the life I was leading.
He just had other things that he wanted to focus on, other things that he wanted to do. I'm not trying to knock him in any way. His heart wasn't in it at that time. I think he wanted to be. I think that he enjoyed doing it, but he just had other things going on at the time that, took his attention away from it.
A lot of things are at play at the time, and things were difficult in my life. At the age I am now, making excuses doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So unfortunately, that was the end of an era for me. I was done. That was it. After just a couple of months of what was a great new beginning, flatlined, and I wasn't there no more. That sucks. That sucks for me. That sucks for Dwayne. It sucks for Daniel. It sucks for everyone involved. And it was an unfortunate period for me. It just didn't work out. And like I said, and it was more than one reason.
And so 2 months in, he was basically out, and he had left, and it was down to just me and Daniel again, just like in 2007.
It was left with just me and my brother again, and so we were back to the same problem again of trying to get somebody to film. I know, and half the time if we did get somebody to film, they wouldn't do any commentary at the time, so you just got, just the visual, and that's it. There's no commentary to help carry the match and the slow spots and stuff. So that really, really hurt the product at that time.
So we had to improvise. We had to try to find a camera person wherever, however we could. We would get, some of Daniel's friends. A guy named Levon helped us out several times with helping us with the camera. Mike, who you would see later on, would still come out occasionally and work the camera for us. So we did the best that we could and tried to get it to keep going. But then after that happens and it's down to just me and Daniel, 3 months into the run, so just a month after, Nick, stopped coming around, one of the ring posts breaks. Right in the middle of Apocalypse 3, what's supposed to be our biggest show of the year, and we get halfway through the show, halfway through the card, and one of the ring posts snaps. So we didn't even get to finish Apocalypse that day. By the time I got the money and the time to replace that ring post, another month had passed. And then we were able to film the second part of Apocalypse. So it was just one thing after another. Following that, trying to just, A, find a camera person, B, trying to get time to where me and Daniel could get together with this camera person. We would go sometimes a month at a time or a little longer before we could do one show to the next. There's just so much time was just passing us by. And over the course of a 1-year period, that 2010 XWF run, we got 12 shows. We wanted to do a weekly show with the big monthly events, and we got 12 shows altogether in a year's time frame. XWF, mind you, was some of the best matches we ever had. Some of the best storyline ideas we ever had. The whole thing wasn't horrible. It wasn't bad as to where it was a complete dumpster fire. It just, the way that we tried to structure it in the way that we did in the past. And with the way that our lives were working now, it wasn't going to work that way. On top of other things that were just completely out of our control, that was just working against us the entire time. So, looking back on that 2010 XWF run, it was a complete disaster. It was a frustrating situation at a very frustrating time. So obviously, season 1, which was the only season that we had done under this XWF banner, was not going well by any means. Daniel and I were so frustrated and had gotten so fed up so quickly because it was so mentally draining. Trying to figure out how we were going to put this show together, how we were going to film the thing whenever we had a chance to actually film one in the first place.
So we got frustrated with it again. And again, with the two of us, there was really only so much we could do.
So by the time Bloodbath took place, which Bloodbath was a show that we used to do under the SBWF banner in July, a month after Apocalypse. Bloodbath took place in October in 2010. That's how far behind schedule we had gotten. So by the time we had filmed that in October, we were already burnt out. And Bloodbath turned out to be our last show in 2010. So we didn't really even officially get a season finale like we had in the past. It's just we did the Bloodbath show and we basically ran out of time. It became the finale show for that season unofficially and kind of just by happenstance. Still, as frustrating as it was, I had invested too much time, too much money, too much effort into not trying to salvage something out of that. You know, I had loved this too much. I wanted it to succeed. I wanted something special to come out of it. And if memory serves me correctly, you know, Daniel and I think Daniel was doing it specifically for me. I don't know for sure, but it seemed like, even though he did enjoy it, I think he really did enjoy what we were doing. He was doing it, I think, out of respect for me, which I greatly appreciate. And if memory serves me correctly, we were planning on attempting to try a season 2 in 2011. But my landlord at the time wasn't happy with all the company I had over all the time. And being that the way that the apartment was set up, being, again, it was still kind of part of their house, you know, the bills were going up because of the schedule that I was working, where they would be asleep, I wouldn't be, and so all the bills were going up, and they just weren't happy with the arrangement. And so basically what it comes down to, they didn't want me there anymore. And, you know, that was basically the end of our agreement. And when that agreement ended, that lease ended, that basically was the final nail in the coffin for XWF. Before my lease agreement could officially end, once again I lobbied for one final show. I didn't want the Bloodbath show in October to just be the end, for it to just, the whole thing to just end abruptly. I don't like that. So once again I lobbied for a final show to give it some kind of a send-off.
Pretty much just like last time, we felt like, all right, well, let's just do one more just to say we had an ending, you know, and call it a day. That's pretty much what that was.
And so in March of 2011, we got together, Daniel and I got somebody to film, and we tried to put together the final event. And it was determined at that time that we tried to bring this thing back. We tried to give it another go round, and it just went so poorly. And it was so disappointing on how things turned out that we had decided that this was going to be the end, you know, and officially this time. You know, once we did this final show, we were never going to wrestle again. So we went to do this show, and again, there were several months between the last show that we had done and the final event. The weather had done a number on the ring itself, so with the ground itself, with the way that the posts were cemented in the ground, you know, it had frozen and thawed, and so the ring posts were starting to cave, or lean rather, and so therefore the ring ropes were sagging. The whole ring was not in very good shape. That limited some of our abilities of things we were able to do in the ring, so things didn't look as good. The entire show was, you know, kind of thrown together. I don't recall if it was because of a time constraint, if I had to get out of the apartment in a certain time or something. I don't remember right offhand, but the show was kind of put together. It wasn't our greatest work. And so when the final event was done, it was... that was a really rough pill to swallow for me. You know, looking back on that previous year, 2010, and how bad it got so fast, and how lackluster the finish was, that final show, it hurt me. Once the final event was over, we filmed this little segment with Daniel and myself, and we did a segment where it was just the two of us. We weren't in character anymore. And we talked about some of our favorite moments, some of our favorite matches, some of our not so fondest memories. And when we were done with that, we had a shot, kind of a little toast of a farewell and, a sign off and, to be the end, to signal the end of our wrestling, I guess, careers altogether. And that was it. And it was time to let wrestling go and move on with our lives. So we fast forward about 6 years. So we find ourselves in 2017. And we'd all moved on with our lives. Again, still the same thing. Living the life, the normal life, the jobs, the homes, the kids, the responsibilities, etc., etc. And I had bought a home, and it was a few years prior to 2017. I bought this home, and in the backyard there's a little building out there that I turned into a little bar / hangout room, and it was the same one that you would later see in the Nick Thunder Sid angle. But it was myself and Nick, and I'm pretty sure Mike was there, but we'd hang out there like almost every weekend. We'd have a couple drinks and share some stories. We'd bring up the old wrestling stuff again, just like in 2010. Like, yeah, man, it would be so cool to do that again, and reminiscing about those days.
We had talked several times about wrestling and doing it again, naturally. Reminiscing about the old days.
I would tell them how much I missed it and how much it meant to me and how much I would give to experience that one more time.
We had talked about it several times. Dwayne was really itching to wrestle again. To have an excuse to get his ass kicked. Gotta love him for that.
Something inside that, especially with how 2010, that XWF era had went, that felt like I had more to give. I didn't feel like it was done. Like it didn't end the way that it should have. And he, Nick specifically would say, hey, I miss it too. I enjoyed it too. I really wanted to, continue it. And, and he would also express his regrets about how the 2010 stuff went and, how he wasn't, too happy with how it went. And he wasn't really happy with himself and how things had transpired. So over the next couple weeks, those talks began to get more frequent and a little more serious.
It started to sound more and more legit every time we talked about it. And then it got serious. And it got serious. Our conversation started detailing our characters, branding, how we wanted to treat it, if we did do it. It was all hypothetical, but that hypothetical got stronger every time we talked about it. And we had several powerful moments about how much that meant to Dwayne and how much it would mean to me to do it again.
And as they did, there was something burning inside of me that I think was always there, but it had just woken up. There was a spark that I hadn't felt in several years. And it was, with every time we would talk about this, it was that passion coming back. It was that burning desire to want to do this. And it kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And finally, one day I said, Nick, if I can find a way to make this happen because I have the space now. If I can make this happen, will you do this with me? And he agreed. He was all for it.
I was behind it. I at first was half-assed about it. I was like, well, I could probably get in the ring.
And so I was able to do some finagling with my finances and was able to come up with some cash to be able to come up with the upfront cost to build this up again and to start this one more time.
And it couldn't be helped. It just couldn't be helped. Eventually, Dwayne was just like, well, I'm just going to slap some money on this and build a ring and see what happens. So he built a ring, and I'm sitting here like, oh, this is legit. This is going to happen, and we're going to make it happen. And that's exactly what we did.
And then that passion was really running at full blast. Once I was able to finagle the finances to be able to, get the materials to build a ring again, and I realized not only did I want this to happen, I needed this to happen. I had to know that if I gave it 100%, I gave it all of my effort, and I put everything that I had into it financially that I could, give up, and mentally, physically, everything that I have, if I put into it, how could it turn out? Just what could it really become? And since 2010, that XWF run, because of how it turned out and how sour of a taste it left in my mouth and how disappointing it was to kind of look back on how it all turned out and how it all transpired, I felt that that's not how it should have ended, and I needed an ending. I needed one last chance. I needed one last chance to give it my all and to make it right. And even if it's one season or whatever, to give it a send-off that I felt that it properly deserved. So going into this time around, even though I really wanted it to happen, and Nick had agreed, and he really wanted it to happen, we had discussed in great length. And we knew that going into this time, that this was going to be the last time. This was going to be it. This was our last chance, our last shot at making this into something special.
We saw that we didn't know how many seasons truly we'd be able to carry this out. Being in our late 20s with responsibilities, we weren't really sure how long this would last. But
he and I were approaching 30 at this point, and with the physicality and what we had physically done to ourselves over the years was already starting to take a toll. So we knew that going into this, that after this is all said and done, this is it. So I went into this wanting to make this something special. And to be something special, I wanted it to look different. I wanted it to look as professional as we can make it with the resources that we had and the location that I have to do it. So instead of just a wooden platform, that was one of the main things. Instead of a wooden platform like we had the past 2 times, I wanted an actual ring. Now, an actual ring costs a lot of money. So I found plans online to make a wrestling ring completely out of wood. It'd be a 16-foot by 16-foot square, but it would be an elevated platform with some bounce, some give, with the ring post, the ring ropes. You'll be able to put some skirting on it, and it looked legit. So it took Nick and I, at the time that I had to get off of work and things like that, it took us about a week to put this ring together. But once we got it up and going, we just got all the pieces together, and we start painting it, get the ropes up, and it really started to look like something.
once the ring was bought and paid for, and we started building it, a vision came to light for me, and I think a vision came to light for him.
The passion was in full swing, The creative fire was back burning at full capacity, and once that ring was up, I was ready to go.
The ring is better than it's ever been before. This ring is totally legit. A well-built ring, with all the support and rebound and the full-fledged ropes and corners, turnbuckles, and everything that it could ever need. Height, all that great stuff.
On top of having the new ring, I also had a new camera. I had a newer camera because I had started working on a YouTube project for the past 2 years prior to this called Big D Films. And so I bought a new camera to be able to do some videos for that. So I had a nicer, newer camera to be able to shoot this show with. And on top of that, I also had, it's kind of like a GoPro, but like an action camera that I would mount on the handlebars of my motorcycle when I do the Big D Films videos. And I thought, okay, well, on top of having the handheld walk-around camera that walks around the ring, I'll be able to put another camera on a tripod, and that kind of be a stationary camera for a different camera angle. So we had that going for us too. And since I was doing this YouTube thing for Big D Films, I got into a little bit of video editing. And it had dawned on me, it had occurred to me that in the past, throughout all of the SBWF stuff and the XWF stuff, we would shoot the show, and that was it. What we got on tape, what we got on the camera, was what the show was. We had to film it in sequence. If we messed something up, then we had to just try to reshoot it, and we had to do everything in order. It was an interesting thing to think about, but this way we didn't have to do that. We could film things in the way that it makes sense as far as outfit changes and things like that, because we were still going to roll with multiple personalities, multiple characters, that sort of thing. So I could later put the show together in post-production and really turn it into something special.
Post-production is a brand new concept to us. This didn't exist in the past. We recorded and that was the end of the story. We recorded, and that was it. No such thing as post-production. We flipped the on button and we wrestled, and we came back and we watched it, and it was a lot of fun then. But this was even better. Having that post-production really changed the game, at least in my opinion, and from my point of view, was a real game changer.
And because I could do post-production, same thing with, like I was just mentioning before, with what we shot on camera was what we got. The commentary was the same way, but since I could do post-production on the entire show, we were then able to go in and add commentary over the video after the fact so that we could get the commentary to comment the action in the ring or what was going on with the show a little bit better. And we were also able to record commentary with two of us instead of just whoever was behind the camera, so we could play off of each other back and forth. And so we had able to do a commentary team in post-production that really helped the show stand out compared to what it used to.
Being able to overdub commentary and to overdub music, all that stuff to truly revamp what we had ever done before. This was, for me, almost a great finale piece.
On top of all these big changes that we were going to incorporate this time around, one thing that we realized is that we needed to learn from our past mistakes with 2010. 2010 ultimately became a learning experience for the 2017 and 2018 run. It was very frustrating at the time, but since we were going to take one last swing at it and give it one last go, we could then use XWF in 2010 to learn from that, figure out what we did wrong or what didn't work, and change it this time around. The scheduling was one of them. Instead of doing a show every week and a big monthly event every month, we found out and we realized that because of our schedules and our real everyday life, that wasn't feasible. So what we ultimately decided to do was we were just going to do a monthly show, set time for once a month to do a show. And instead of it being a weekly show, every single show we were going to do was going to be treated like a, big, like, super card, a big, really important show. And that way we felt that every show that we did, we would get more bang for our buck, essentially, or more, we'd get more with the limited time that we had. So we decided to go that route, and it was a good thing that we did, because it seemed like it worked out very well for us that way. The only setback that came into play was Daniel, unfortunately, was not able to participate in the project.
The downside of all this is that Daniel couldn't be as big of a part. He still played his part, but it wasn't as big of a part as he has been in the past.
By this time, I was 24, have 2 kids. At this point, I have to work. Whether I want to work on Saturdays and, nights and all this other stuff, I have no choice in that matter. Kids got to eat. But during this time period, I also managed to have enough time to pursue a bigger passion for myself in terms of music. And for the first time, I had a band. So that took up a lot of my time my spare time on the weekends. We had, we're playing shows, all that kind of stuff. I was really huge into music again. So when he called me, I basically just told him flat out that I wasn't going to be able to join him on this round, because aside from work and the family and the band and all that stuff, I just simply didn't have the time to do it, which was unfortunate. But
so unfortunately, Daniel was out of the picture. And once we heard that, we almost thought to ourselves, like, we shouldn't even go through with it. It just wouldn't be right without him. He basically told us, like, I would love to be a part of it. I just don't think it'll work. If I can make it work sometime down the road, then I'll be more than happy to come in. And once he said that, I think Nick and I both were a little more okay with going through with it. So ultimately, we pulled the trigger, we built the ring, and we got Mike involved.
We had gotten to involve our mutual friend Mike into the product and allow him to wrestle with us.
And Mike, who would then play Lonnie Robinson, and he would play another character later on, but he came in and he filmed for us in 2010. He played a manager role in 2010 for a time or two also, so he wasn't a complete stranger to it all, but he had never wrestled before. So with the addition of Mike, the new ring, the new setup, the new cameras, the new way we were going to film and produce and edit the show, everything was new, everything was fresh. We felt like we needed a name to go with that. Instead of resurrecting the XWF name, we felt like, let's give it a fresh new name to go with everything else. And so after, I think, even a couple weeks of trying to find something that we felt would work, we ultimately settled on SMIW, Southern Michigan Impact Wrestling, and that is where the SMIW name came from and why all of this has kind of been rolled under that one umbrella since then. Since I was already doing YouTube with the Big D Films channel, and we were going to be editing this show the way that we were going to be doing it now, we thought, well, why don't we take this and we put this on YouTube too as its own entity under its own channel and see what kind of audience we can get from this.
We wanted to make this for an audience, which was also brand new. We did this for ourselves and ourselves only. We didn't expect anybody else would get to, unless they were in the circle, have the pleasure of enjoying this the way we had enjoyed it in the past. So now, being able to put this, say, on YouTube and having an internet audience was a brand new concept as well, and that was a driving force.
Nobody had ever seen any of the original SBWF stuff, nor the XWF stuff. So, with the way that this looks, and how we're going to be producing this show, I think we could really come up with a very strong product here. Why don't we try to put it out online and see what kind of audience we can get? And so that's what we ultimately decided to do. So once all those decisions were made, all of this fresh new look, everything that we were doing to make it as awesome as we possibly could. We decided to take a couple weeks. We practiced with Mike. We practiced with ourselves. We hadn't, Nick and I hadn't wrestled in, 6 or 7 years at that point. And so, you know, we worked the ring rust off, and finally it was time to shoot our very first show, which was a golden opportunity. And this was going to be the make it or break it, to see if all of these changes and all of this hard work was going to pay off and it turn out how we expect it and how we wanted it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome all to SMIW.
Our first show, A Golden Opportunity, went over so well. It was so good. It was better than anything that we had ever done. It exceeded our expectations, and it started to gain a following online almost instantaneously. It was kind of overwhelming. I wasn't quite expecting the response that we got, so we knew we were onto something.
The fan base that we had that immediately grew from the beginning. From episode 1, we had a fan base. It was small, mind you, but we had a fan base, and we almost didn't expect that. And it just kind of popped up out of nowhere. We had a lot of support on both sides. In relationships that he had developed over the years, or family, and the same my direction. Even from workmates and strangers alike. We had people just kind of pop in and enjoy the product from day one.
You know, with the way that we had shot the show, the wrestling ring, you know, we were standing out. There was a lot of things on YouTube and other websites that I would scour these websites, and a lot of what I would see is, you know, this trampoline stuff, you know, with these kids just kind of bouncing around, stuff that we were doing, you know, 13 years earlier. And that's the kind of backyard wrestling you would see. I would find occasionally something kind of like ours, but it was very rare. So we stood out, and I think that's what, you know, got us that audience real quick right off the bat, was how different it was, and how good it looked. We did a golden opportunity, and about 3 weeks later, we did our next show due to the way that we worked out the schedule, which was working perfect. You know, we weren't overdoing it with trying to do week to week to week to week like we had in the past.
It worked out as planned. I mean, we methodically structured. I mean, we knew that we were going to have a break week. We knew we were going to have a practice week and a discussion week. And then we knew we were going to have actual recording week. And we knew that's how that was going to work. And it was operated as such that it would work with all of our work schedules and home lives and all that stuff. And it was effective. It was an effective plan.
You know, it became very apparent to, like, me and Nick very quickly that this was already turning into our best work, bar none. The storylines were some of the best ones that we had ever wrote. The in-ring work between Nick and I is some of the best stuff, hands down, that we had ever done.
The Nick Thunder Sid rivalry, which was like the foundation for me of season 1, and it worked out well. I mean, that rivalry encapsulated nearly, not all of them, but nearly every episode of season 1, and we had solid matches between those two characters. Those two characters really drove a powerful story.
We started to really even get crafty with it, where instead of just like stories in the ring, we started to use other things and other elements to spice up the storyline. So, for instance, I would film a vignette for Pain in like a graveyard scene, you know, to really make that character stand out and look really creepy and intimidating. We filmed a barroom brawl segment where Nick and I were just trashing this little bar, and, you know, broken glass, and it was just a real fight We also did like a motorcycle / car chase where we took the cameras and we went down the road. We wound up at my folks' house, and it kind of brought everything full circle because we wound up filming a little segment in their backyard.
When we planned it, we knew that when I chased him down, that we would show up to where the first ring ever was, and I would walk up and I would go, this makes sense. He's got to be here. I mean, you know, this is home. This is where we start.
We went there, we shot that scene, and because so much history had happened right there, and it brought it all full circle, it worked perfect. So we were really getting creative with this, and it was really working out very well. Unfortunately, because we had started so late in the year, it was July or August or something like that, we were able to only get 5 shows in with the way that we had developed our schedule.
We knew going in this is going to be a short season. We've been doing the season thing for a while, and we knew this was going to be a short one because we started in August. So we knew that we were only going to get so many episodes in this first season. So we had to make them concise and to the point, and we did.
But those shows were so good, I could live with that. You know, it was turning out so well. And it was decided that our season finale, we would bring back one more particular element from the very beginning, the SBWF days. We brought back Apocalypse, and Apocalypse was going to be our final show of the year. It was going to be our season finale. And Apocalypse was going to basically always be our season finale. That's how we were going to wrap up our seasons.
Apocalypse has always been sort of this product's version of WrestleMania, which is a season close episode. The most powerful thing we could probably do to end a season, to end what we were doing for that particular year. And it's always worked, and it was awesome to be able to carry that forward.
We brought Apocalypse out. We did that show. My brother was a part of a band at that time, and he was doing really, really well with that. We were able to use one of their songs as the theme song for the Apocalypse show.
I do remember in the first season, he actually came to me and asked me if they could use one of the songs from my band for the theme song for one of their shows, which was really cool. It was a nice little cross promotion thing that was really cool to see.
Once Apocalypse was over and the season had ended, we realized that during the off season we had an audience now because of this whole YouTube thing, and we realized that we needed to still give content to our viewers. So we had developed a couple other little things. We started doing Beyond the Ropes, which was like an interview segment of, you know, the characters and their history, you know, leading up to this point. And since I had so much stuff from the past, from the SBWF stuff to the XWF stuff, we did From the Vault, which releases old school content for all of our viewers to see. So it was still something that we could produce and put out during that off season. And with all of those things, the shows turning out as well as they did, we were gaining an audience. I gotta tell you, 2017, that was probably the greatest time of my life. There was so much fun, and I was able to be so creative in doing something that I love to do. I can't really compare it to much else.
I couldn't be more proud of my influence and the collaboration that took place here between me and Dwayne into making this product what it was. Despite how short-handed we were to making it happen. And it's something to be proud of, and I'll remember it forever.
I loved every bit of it, and I have to say that year, that first season of SMIW, was the pinnacle of everything that we had ever done. And after coming in so strong in 2017, the sky was the limit for us in 2018. With the extreme highs that we experienced in 2017, it seemed like it should have just carried over into 2018. And unfortunately, it's hard to explain, but it feels like that didn't happen. As soon as 2017 Apocalypse had finished, we started experiencing a lot of scheduling conflicts. Even during the off season, trying to film Beyond the Ropes, it was hard for us to get together sometime. We did learn that Mike was getting ready to have a child. I believe we had learned that during the off season.
Mike has a baby on the way, and I'm full-fledged into my family and our situation,
and my work schedule was kind of crazy. So I mean, life was just kind of getting in the way. But it's hard to explain. It felt different. It felt like something had changed and something wasn't quite the same once 2018 season was really starting to roll around. I had gotten together with Nick, and originally, before we even started in 2017, the original plan was that we were going to do 3 seasons. We were planning for 3 seasons, and that was going to be it. We were going to retire, call it good. But I expressed this feeling to Nick during the off season. I said, something doesn't feel right, man. Something isn't working. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I have this feeling. I have this sinking feeling in my stomach. We're never going to get to season 3 with the way that life is, the way, the family life is, the way the work life is. Something is going to prevent us from getting to a season 3. I can feel this. I can already tell. I don't know I can't remember if he necessarily agreed right at that current moment, but I do recall that he did pretty much agree with me, and we agreed to cut out the 3rd season.
When we started, we were hoping for 3. We were hoping for 3 seasons, but after already doing a short-lived season 1, it was evident already that season 2 might have to be the end.
So what that meant was 2018 was going to be the final ever season, and after 2018 was over, we were going to retire, and that was going to be the end of our wrestling careers. I mean, still with all that being said, we still went into 2018 wanting to incorporate even more of our talents into the final finished product of SMIW.
Season 2 had a lot of cool things about it. We were able to incorporate a lot of neat stuff. We were able to incorporate all of our individual talents and Dwayne's organizational structure and videography understandings that he had learned over the years to help produce a product.
Daniel started to do some other audio work for us. Nick was doing some audio production. Daniel started doing the pre-match visuals, the Photoshop work for us.
I did all of the production work for the band that I was in at the time. The album art, logos, all that stuff. So I helped him design the logo and the SMIW logo and all that stuff. Did a lot of the imagery for the shows.
He did some of the visual effects for our openings and our themes, the wrestler openings and stuff, and that was really cool. And hats off to the guy for that.
On top of that, Daniel and Nick together, they had wrote the SMIW theme song that you would hear starting in 2018 all the way through everything else that we still do to this day.
I actually wrote the theme song for the show, and Nick also collaborated with me a little bit on that.
He was still involved in writing the majority of the theme music. I just put in a little solo for it, but me and him collaborated a little bit to make the theme music.
At the end of the shows, at the end of the episodes, I would roll the credits, and that way our audience would know who contributed what. Because not only were we proud of what we were doing as far as like the in-ring stuff and the show in general, but we were proud of our individual contributions to the show. So we could basically let our audience know what it was that we were all individually capable of, as well as together in the show altogether. along with those other things, we still wanted to try to be innovative. Since this was going to be our last season, we wanted to go out with a bang. So we got another guy, Chase Ward, who portrayed Suave Aiden Lane, and he portrayed Brian Myers, and he was also another helping hand with filming and that sort of thing. So we had another guy to, help us out with this final season.
Chase was a big help for us, and he did help us even in season 1 behind the scenes. He was there for some of our episodes, just as a bipartisan player, and then in season 2 wrestled with us as a wrestling persona and got involved in a very interesting way, and for some moments, for me, hilarious moments.
We also introduced the Skycam, which was another camera on another tripod, which would basically be on the roof of my garage to get a kind of like an overhead aerial view. And so, that was something new that we had incorporated that I really liked. And so we were still trying to, top ourselves from 2017 and still make the show even bigger and better with every single episode that we were doing until it was all said and done. And so when it did finally come to an end, we were producing the absolute best show we could possibly produce. The first show of 2018, which was New Beginnings, basically went off without a hitch. But it was like an entirely different feeling had come down over basically all of us. It's very hard to explain. But in 2017, we were anxious. We were excited. We were ready and willing to get out there and push the envelope and see what we could really do. And we were just ready to get in there. 2018 came around and everybody seemed bogged down almost. I don't really know what other words to use to describe that.
We felt it. We felt it from episode 1 of season 2 forward. So from New Beginnings through to the SMIW Second Apocalypse. We were heavy. We felt heavy by the weight of the project and the weight of our responsibilities as adults and the weight of our own physicality. And it made some of this difficult.
The enthusiasm just wasn't there anymore. It took us a while to even get filming started. Like, we'd all get together and we'd sit down on the back porch and we'd kind of just hang out for a while, and we kind of had to, drag ourselves up off the back porch and almost force ourselves into getting going and starting to do the show. And the enthusiasm was dwindling. On top of the scheduling conflicts, and all of that, I don't know. The atmosphere between 2017 and 2018 had changed drastically. And I don't know about to everybody else, but it was very apparent. And I could tell that things were going to start fizzling out very, very quickly. After that first show, I really felt like things were going to turn around for us, because Daniel had decided that he wanted to come in and he wanted to be a part of the show. And I felt that that was just maybe the spark that we needed. And he was going to be able to provide, experience, a new look at things. And, being that he was such an important part of SMIW over the years, to have him come in and take part, I was ecstatic over. I know Nick was too. I think everybody was.
I told him for the second year, I was really going to make it a point to at least do some things with them, because after seeing everything that they did the first year, the production of it and everything was just so good, I wanted to be a part of it. So I was going to make it a point to do some things.
So after that first show, he decides he wants to come in, and he and I talk over some storyline ideas and
we had many, many late night discussions of, storylines, which characters to bring back, and all that kind of stuff. And I was really looking forward to it because the storylines we had planned were awesome.
So now we're at our second show of season 2. It's Rising Stars, and it's Daniel's first match back, and he's excited. We're excited. He's going to be in the ring with myself and with Nick. It's going to be a triple threat.
We had one match where Daniel was able to be included, and it was an awesome match. We had Dante involved, and it was pretty sweet. From my standpoint and from theirs, I hope. I assume as much anyway.
We get in there, we do the match. Everything's going great. It's probably up to a certain point in the match, probably one of the best matches I've ever had. Everything was just so smooth. It was just wonderful. And everything that we wanted to do in the match, for the most part, we were able to do.
We start the match off, everything's looking good, and he takes a nasty bump on his left shoulder, and going back and watching the tape, you could tell it was hurting him pretty bad.
I think it was just past the halfway point of the match. I take a clothesline. I've lost count of how many clotheslines, I've received over the years, and worse than clotheslines. Took a clothesline and instantly knew that something didn't go right. That something happened. Landed right on this shoulder, and the thing of it was because I was driven. I wanted this to look as good as possible, so I was putting everything I had into it. And so when he threw me into the ropes for this clothesline, I was like, I'm gonna really throw myself back and really sell this clothesline. And I think he kind of slightly hooked his arm a little bit and caught me like right here, and it turned me sideways, and I landed right on this shoulder. And it just hurt so bad. Like, I couldn't put any weight, like trying to get up and put your hands down like this, couldn't put any weight on my arm. It would just give right out. Couldn't move it, nothing. Towards the end of the match, I was very close to just bowing out. Like, I can't do it. But I am really proud of the fact that I finished that match.
He went on to finish the match, but you can tell something wasn't right. After that, it was sometime later, a couple days or something, when he could make a doctor's appointment, he went in and...
I tore my AC right here, the joint that connects your shoulder to your collarbone. I according to the doctor, I partially tore it. And so as a result, my collarbone is raised up right over here. And it's going to be that way for the rest of my life.
It was so unfortunate for that to happen to him, because we were so excited for him to take part in it, and he was finally to a point where he was able to make his schedule work out for him, and he was really excited and wanting to get in there.
It was very unfortunate because we had much more planned for Daniel throughout more of the season. We had a lot more involvement with his characters and him himself.
I don't think Daniel's injury could have came at a worse time, because of how things, I think, were slowly starting to progress. It was devastating. Nothing like this had ever happened to any of us throughout all of the years that we had done this. So for that to happen to him, not only was it unfortunate for him personally and for us, but it was kind of unnerving. Once the injury happened, again, he has to work. He's got a young family to support and care for, and he had made the decision that, whatever was going to happen with the shoulder problem, he was going to have to back out. He couldn't risk, getting injured to the point where he couldn't work and provide for his family. It's completely understandable. None of us were going to fault him for that.
And it was pretty much at that point I was like, I have to bow out. I can't do anything else. I have to officially retire at this point, because I could not risk another injury of any kind, even of that severity. Because if I don't work, my family doesn't eat. So that was when I basically had to bow out.
He's a responsible man, just like the rest of us want to be and are. He's got kids and home life to go to and a work life to go to, and can't afford injury just like the rest of us, no matter how passionate we are about this.
It sucks because there was a lot that I wanted to do. There was a lot I wanted to contribute, and it just wasn't able to happen. But the entire SMIW era was just phenomenal stuff, and just even that one match, I was glad to be a part of.
I personally feel like when his injury happened, that was the beginning of the end of SMIW. A couple weeks later, we were going to move on. We're going to continue on without Daniel. We had done all of 2017 without him. We still had Chase. There was myself, Nick, and Mike. And we were just going to continue to press on, try not to let the injury get to us. And we go to film The Gauntlet. And The Gauntlet is really kind of a double-edged sword for me, because there is, in a way, I feel that The Gauntlet of 2018 was perhaps the best show that we had ever done, because we had done so much. But I think we were a little over-enthusiastic with it because it took us 2 weeks to film. We couldn't even film the entire show in one day. And so we were trying to do so much with what little time that we were already having, and it was getting very exhausting. After The Gauntlet, Nick had contacted me and basically said that Mike was basically done. Mike was not really even a fan of wrestling. I mean, he liked it, but he wasn't like a diehard fan and watched it all the time and studied it like say I would, or even like Nick or my brother would. And so, I think that, Mike enjoyed it, but he had other priorities, and he had a child on the way. He had other things musically that he wanted to do. He was into music also. And so after The Gauntlet, it was basically Mike was done. And Nick and I were pretty burnt by this point anyway. Here it is, it's 2018, and it was already like September, and we only had 3 episodes done, because of Daniel coming in and then having to leave because of the injury, with Mike stepping away. Nick and I had rewrote the script for season 2 7 or 8 times over the course of like 2 or 3 months.
We did rewrite season 2 several times due to injury, to weather, to scheduling conflicts, all the adult stuff that gets in the way. So we had rewrote season 2 several times.
Plus all of the in-ring work stuff that we were doing, the writing, the everything. It was so exhausting on so many different levels that, it just, Nick and I were just as burnt out, I think, as everybody else was. Finally, a little while after filming The Gauntlet, Nick had called me up and said, hey man, I think that we just need to do one last show and wrap it up and call it quits. And again, it was already September by this point. We knew time was running out as far as the weather for the year. We'd already determined that season 2 was going to be the final season. Things, once again, with scheduling and stuff, just wasn't working out. The enthusiasm was gone. Everybody was burnt out. It's just, basically, it was time. It was time to look at the end. And so Nick and I sat down one final time, and we rewrote we rewrote the season and the entire series finale one last time, and we prepared to film our final show ever. The day that we filmed Apocalypse: The Last Stand may be one of the most emotional days of my entire life. Filming the final shows in the past for SBWF and XWF, I think in the back of my mind, I didn't truly believe that it was over for good. But this time was different. This time I believed it. This time I believe that this is it. And it's gonna be over. This was gonna be the last time that I got to do something that I love so much. It'd be the last time I'd get to do something that has been a part of my life for literally half of my life. Nearly 15 years. And I was going to have to face the fact that it was time to let it go.
We knew going into this episode, this was an official end. We didn't even have hopes of a season 3. That window of a season 3 being a potential option kind of closed once we got to Apocalypse in season 2. Walking into this show, I had a lot of mixed emotions, as sure as I knew Dwayne would as well.
The entire day was just a roller coaster ride for me, because I'm trying to get through these other 3 matches the best that I can, because my mind was so focused on that final one, and it was time. It was time. I'd gotten through the other 3 matches, and it was time for the final match in SMIW history, and it was time for my final match and my swan song, my farewell, to this chapter of my life, basically. I remember I had talked to Nick about that match a week or 2 before, and I told him exactly what I wanted to do. I told him how I wanted it to go, and how I wanted to end everything, and he let me have that. He said, this is your thing. It always has been. This is your passion. This is your love. We'll do it how you want it to be done. And I greatly appreciated that. If there was anything that I could be proud of throughout the last 15 years, and all the matches that I've had and all the times that I've done this, if there's one thing that I can be proud of, it was this last match. It was this final match, this final performance. I believe that with what we did in the ring together, Nick and I, we told an amazing story. With everything that we did, I think it to me, just watching it back, it's even kind of heart-wrenching, because we tried to put so much emotion into it, not just in a performance aspect, but there was a lot of emotion coming out in that match for real. And I remember with every move, with every spot, all I could think of was, this is the last time I'm going to do this. When he'd go to even suplex me or something, and I thought, this will be the last time I take this. This will be the last time that I do this maneuver. This will be the last time I do this spot. Every spot throughout that match, that's the only thing that would repeat in my mind over and over and over again. And so the emotion was building with each passing moment.
This will be the last time I do an electric chair drop. This will be the last time I do a panic attack. This will be the last time that I could show prowess in front of a camera. And that still kind of means a lot to me.
Finally, we had gotten to the end of the match, and the time had come. And one thing that I wanted, that I was adamant about, was this very thing. And I looked at him in the eye. I completely broke character. And I said, "It's time, brother. Go ahead and finish it."
I could feel Dwayne's emotion. Pain already broken. The character is done already. When it comes to doing this move, Pain's gone. Pain's already vanished. It was the man. It was Dwayne the Man.
It was my way of telling him and telling myself that it was time to end this. It was time to bring this to a close. And it was time for me to put this chapter of my life behind me and put this part of my life to rest, and that it was okay to do so. Afterwards, we had a moment. He broke character himself, and he brought me in. He hugged me.
We got in that moment, and we let it overtake us. We let it become us, and it was bonding at its max. That felt right, and it still feels right.
He spun me around. He picked me up on his shoulders. It set me up for the electric chair, as he had done so many times. And as I was sitting there, waiting to be thrown off, that same thought returned to my mind one last time. It was that thought of, this will be the last time that I do this. This will be the last time I ever take this. And this will be the last bump I ever take. As he threw me off, it felt like time had slowed down. It was like I could see all the things that I had worked so hard for over the past 15 years just flashed before my eyes. It was so surreal that all those moments, all those years, all those matches, all those memories just flashed before my eyes. And as I approached the mat, as I was falling, it was the most bittersweet feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. It was a feeling of overwhelming sadness that it was all coming to an end, yet mixed with a feeling of being so proud of what I had accomplished over the years. It was finally over. And I'll never forget, once he went to go for the cover, he took that World Heavyweight Championship belt and he laid it over my chest before going for the cover. And to me, that was a very classy and respectful thing for him to do for me.
I knew I couldn't just pin him and be done with it. I knew that wasn't enough. I strapped that belt over his chest and pinned him with that belt there and gave it to him, and had that symbology in place on purpose, because that matters to us.
He knew how much this meant to me, how much it still does, and how much it always will. For him to do that, I can't really, I think, put into words how much that meant to me. And then once that was over, then his comments that he made to me, once it was over, meant the world.
You're great. Great champ. You're a great wrestler.
Those last few moments, those last couple minutes, meant the world to me. Because he, that final action and those final words that he told me, that he said to me, as strange as it sounds even to me, but it almost felt like some sort of validation that I'd been searching for a long, long time, for something that I was good at. And for him to say that to me, like I said, it was like some kind of validation that I really was good. And that there was appreciation from him, and there was, for what we had done, what we had accomplished, and that he was a part of it. And those moments, those last couple minutes, they mean the world to me, and I'll hold on to those memories, and I'll hold them close to my heart for the rest of my life. Once the match was over, we invited Mike and Chase back into the ring. We had a pretty powerful moment with just the four of us, and it was amazing. I got to hug every last one of them. I got to thank them for doing this with me and making this dream of mine come true. The only thing I wish is that I could have had every single person that had ever wrestled with me, that had ever held a video camera, or had simply anything to do with this entire thing over the years. And I wish I would have had all of them in the ring with me, so I could have thanked every single one of them. Because no matter how small a role they played, or how big a role they played, every single person shaped this in one way, shape, or form into what it had become, and made it so special to me. Because it's because of all of them, over the course of all these years, I was able to live out my dream. And whether I could have thanked them all right then and there, or just thanking them now, I thank every last one of them. Anybody who's ever participated in it or supported it, because it was everything to me. The past 15 years sure has been a journey. The fact that I have so much of this stuff on tape that spans such a long period of time, it's amazing to be able to go back and look on this and see something that I've created with the help of so many other people evolve and grow over time into something amazing. And on top of that, like myself, Daniel, Nick, we can also go back and look at how we all grew up. We got to see this product evolve over the years, but we got to see ourselves evolve. And it's one of the most amazing things, I think.
It's still awesome to go back and watch because it's like a time capsule. Me and Nick say it all the time that sometimes walking into my brother's house is like walking into a museum of our lives. He still has the belts, has all the tapes. He's hung on to this stuff for so long, and I'm actually really grateful for it because not everybody has those memories.
This encapsulated me as an individual more than anything has ever done in my life. Dwayne has done an excellent job at documenting and archiving my history better than has ever been done in the past, even beyond this wrestling. There are things that he holds on to in his personal, private collection, video and music-wise, that does not exist elsewhere in the world.
It's really cool to have all this to look back on, and literally, we could put in one tape and watch this match, and then go watch this one, and then watch another one throughout the 3 different eras, and you can almost see us. We can almost watch ourselves grow up, and I don't think very many people are able to do that. So, and that goes for, there was, me, Nick, and Dwayne. We were kind of the main 3 throughout the years. So it's really cool to be able to go back 15 years and see how things progressed. It's awesome.
Friendships like this are rare. History recorded this way is rare. And I hope that anybody who sees this later, and I hope the future me that sees this later, appreciates and respects what has happened in this era and throughout these years and these things that have taken place. And don't take that kind of thing for granted. Thank you all. And most notably, thank you, Dwayne, and everyone else involved in making this project. This is a big deal. No matter what it looks like, it's a big deal. Especially to me.
SMIW wasn't just a hobby. It was a passion, and it was a dream. And I think even as a kid, I wanted to be a wrestler, even if I didn't know it. But I knew that I would never get to do it as a profession. I'd never get to do it to make a living. But I wasn't going to give up on that dream. I was going to make it happen. Somehow, some way. And with the help of my friends, my brothers, and so many other people, I've been able to experience and live that dream in my own way. This time I feel in my heart that it is over for good. And I accept that. But the experiences that I got to have, the memories that I got to make with so many people that I love so much, those are the things that I'll hold on to for the rest of my life. And I think that's the most important thing. Follow your dreams. Make them become a reality. One way, shape, or form. That's what I take away from SMIW. I got to live my dream. And I'll never forget it.